Real estate investment. Does the bank own part of my home? No. Get ready because it's time to raise the stakes with real estate. When talking to people about real estate, it's common to hear people say something like the bank owns a portion of the real estate property due to the loan, due to the mortgage, which is not exactly true. It's a fairly large exaggeration, but we hear it commonly. It's useful to be able to understand what people mean when they say something like the bank owns a percentage of the property. Also useful to understand what actual ownership means and the difference between ownership and basically the loan and the mortgage. So basic scenario looks something like this. You got the home cost $500,000, down payment $100,000. That means we have a loan and the property securing the loan of the $400,000. That means that the $400,000 that you owe the bank divided by the property value $500,000 is 80%. You can hear people say, well, the bank owns 80% of the home. Again, not exactly true. It means that you financed 80% of the home. You owe the bank then the amount of the $400,000. And if you default on that, then the bank has some recourse and could possibly foreclose on the home. But that's substantially different than the bank actually owning the home, which we'll go into more detail in terms of what does ownership actually mean to kind of clarify this point. Before we do, however, let's just think real quickly, where might this have come from? I would think that this came from some kind of exaggeration that basically became common kind of parlance, common talking points at a later point in time. It would be like something like if you lost a game of table tennis, a game of ping pong or something like that, and you lost badly and you said, man, I got killed. It's like, well, no, you didn't actually get killed. You're exaggerating quite grossly there. You actually just lost a game of ping pong. You didn't actually die. We always do things like exaggerate. Human beings always exaggerate. How often do we exaggerate? Like 5,352% of the time we exaggerate, like all the time. So I think this would most likely have come from an exaggeration as well, where, for example, if you were to ask somebody, wow, man, this is a nice home, and they were to say something like, yeah, but the bank owns 80% of it. That's an exaggeration. That means you financed 80% of it. The bank doesn't actually own 80% of it, but you can see how that would be kind of an exaggeration that's used so often that basically people say that and don't kind of see that it's an exaggeration at any more oftentimes. So let's kind of, to think about that, let's think about, well, what does it mean to actually own the home versus what does it mean to basically have a loan and the house as security? We talked about in prior presentations what a loan is, what a note is, what the mortgage is, what it means basically for the home to be security. What does it mean basically to own real estate? What does that actually mean? And this, we're going to be referencing down here the New York City Bar Legal Reference Service, so you can look that up if you want to research on this further. But ownership rights in real property, what does that mean? When you own real property, you have certain rights that go along with the ownership including. So we often hear this as kind of like a bundle of rights. What does it mean to own real property, land, and the things attached to it? In other words, it means that we have a bundle of rights with regards to that property. Now, when we look at these rights, as we go through these rights, we'll see that the bank doesn't have any of these rights to the property. What does the bank have the right to? They only have a right if we default on the loan, they have the right to the recourse possibly due to the home being security, but that's much different than the bundle of rights. So let's look at these bundle of rights and just think of it in context of what the bank has and what we have, right? The right to possession. Obviously, we possess the home. Does the bank have the right to possess the home even though we owe them financing worth 80% of the home? No, the bank can't possess. The bank can't come into, possess the home, come into the home and hang out on our property or something like that without our permission because we own the home. They don't own the home. So the right to control, again, the bank doesn't have the right to control the property. If they actually owned 80% of the property and we wanted to say paint the house or something like that, the bank could come in and say, yeah, I think you should paint it blue and we own 80%. So we have the controlling interest, you should paint it blue. He's like, no, bank, you don't own, I don't have to paint it blue because or like if you're going to redo the floor and carpet or hardwood, the bank would be like, I prefer carpet. That no, you don't, you don't ask the bank that because they don't own 80% of the property. They have no right, to be able to do that. Right to use and quit enjoyment. So obviously, again, the bank doesn't have 80% interest. They can't use the property. So like you couldn't come home one day and the bank's like, yeah, we got some new employees at the bank over here and they needed a place to stay. So we just told them, since we own 80% of your property, that they could basically stay at your place for a while. It's not really your place because we own 80% of it. No, they can't stay at the place because you don't own 80% bank. You only have limited access in the event that I was to default on my payments of the loan, and then even that recourse is restricted to foreclosure and selling the home in certain conditions in order to recap the loan. The right to allow others to use to lease it. So again, the bank can't be like, yeah, I own 80% of it. We felt like we should lease out, a couple rooms over there. We thought that'd be a good idea. They can't. You can't lease the home because you don't own the home, bank. The bank doesn't own the home. Right to privacy and to exclude others. So the bank can't be like, we're not going to allow this person over to your home because, no, the bank doesn't have the right to do that. Right to dispossession or transfer the property to someone else by selling, gifting, or inheritance. So the bank doesn't have the right to say, I'm going to gift, 80% of the home to somebody else. Now, they might sell the loan to somebody else. The loan might be transferable. But again, the loan isn't the same thing as the ownership interest. That just means you'd be paying a different person under the same terms, in essence, of the loan generally. So the right to use the property as collateral. So the bank can't do the collateral on the loan. You're using the home for basically the collateral. That's basically how the situation is set up, meaning the bank has recourse on the home only in the event, once again, that you default on the contract, you default on the payments, in essence, of the loan. So some more rights to continue. Your ownership rights to real property include the right to use the surface of the land, called the surface rights. So that's going to be the surface of the land. Again, bank doesn't have the right to use any of that. You also have the right to use what is under the surface, such as oil, gas, and minerals. So it's kind of important to understand that. You want to understand and make sure that you have the rights, or determine what type of rights that you have. The rights underneath the land, oil, gas, minerals, which again, the bank doesn't have the 80% of. This is called the subsurface rights. Your ownership rights include water rights or riparian rights, which are the rights to any water on the property and the right to make reasonable use of the flowing water that passes through or by your property. You have the right to use the space above the land, including the right not to have the air directly over your property blocked by building or adjacent properties. And when you acquire property, you must be careful to determine if any of these rights, such as the air rights, have been sold or pledged. So you got to determine and make sure when you're purchasing the property, that these rights are there. But the idea here being, of course, that to own the property is these bundle of rights, which basically include usage of the property, which of course, even though you own a loan to the bank and have a mortgage on it, doesn't mean that the bank has any of these bundle of rights. And therefore, to say that the bank owns some portion of the property due to the loan and the mortgage is really basically a gross exaggeration. But it's commonly used, so it's useful to kind of use it, but it's also kind of useful to know what the exaggeration is, what it means to have ownership, what it means to have a loan, what it means to have a mortgage.